Hi, it's Charlie again, and today we're going to talk about our denial of God. And we have a little friend here with us. This is Abigail. And let's see, on her back it says, "I've been naughty." And it sounds like us from time to time. So let me put you all up on your pedestal, and then we'll talk about our denial of God. Now, surely as there's a creator, and we know that simply from our previous discussions, that there must be a creator, a being that must exist, or a necessary being. Because there is a creator, we can logically deduce things about him simply by the way he structured the universe and all of creation. I'd like to read you something from the book of Romans. It's from the first chapter, 18th through the 20th verse of the book of Romans. It says, "The wrath of God is being revealed from heaven against all the godlessness and wickedness of men who suppress the truth by their wickedness, since what may be known about God is plain to them, because God has made it plain to them. For since the creation of the world, God's invisible qualities, his eternal nature, and eternal power and divine nature have been clearly seen, being understood from what has been made, so that men are without excuse." You can see that there's structure, and there's loveliness, and there's form to this dog, and we can look at it and we can know things about God simply by looking at a dog or a tree or the way the stars are set in place. This little doggy here demonstrates love to us, unconditional love almost, and that shows something about God's nature. And if you look at the animals, the way that he's put them together and how he's placed them in our lives, we can tell things about God from that, or like I say, about from the trees, or the beauty of the sunshine, and as it's setting and as it's rising. He gives us these wonderful displays of his love. So let me put my little Abigail down. And so what the Bible here is saying is that all of these things do display God's knowledge and wisdom, but we don't want to face that. We know he's there, we can see him up there, not him personally, I mean his handiwork, and it lets us know that he is ever present and that we must be accountable to him. And that's a freaky thing. It's a scary thing to know that we are living in the presence of our Creator, and we somehow can't attain him. We can't know how to be right with him. And so what do? We suppress the truth. We suppress that truth. We push it down. We put it out of our minds and behind us, and we make up things about God from our own heads. We, instead of being created in God's image, we create God in our image. And we go through this long process of just living our lives as if we are okay with this God, even though we know that there's something fundamentally wrong with our relationship. And a good example of that is when a mother, for example, she wants to discipline her child because her child has done wrong. And where's the child? It's hiding under the bed. Well, we're doing the same thing. We're trying to hide under the bed from God. Now, the Bible lets us know in the Psalm 51, King David, after he had an adulterous relationship with Bathsheba, he was caught, and he acknowledged his sin, and he said, to you alone, against you alone have I sinned. We may offend other people, but we don't really sin against other people. We sin against God. And he wrote in the psalm, he said, "Surely I was sinful at birth, sinful from the time my mother conceived me." Without getting into any great detail on this, we are created. We did not evolve. Adam was our first father, and he sinned against God. And because of that, we fall under the federal headship of Adam. Adam was sinful, and all men below him stand condemned because of his sin. You may not agree with that. You may think, well, that's not fair. But Barack Obama is our president. Whether we like him or whether we don't like him, it doesn't matter. If he signs a law, we are obligated to obey that law. He's our federal head at this point. And it's the same thing with George Bush. Whether you liked him or whether you didn't like him, he was our federal head. When he signed a law, we obeyed that law, or we paid a penalty. And it's the same thing. King David is saying that in the psalm, and Jesus confirmed that, saying that we are condemned already. There's nothing we need to do to be condemned. And you can prove this very easily. Go to any parent on earth, any mother or any father that's raised a child, and ask them, did you need to teach your child to do wrong? And the answer is no. We've all screwed up from the very beginning. We all rebel against our parents. We throw temper tantrums. We get angry. We throw fits. And in fact, what we need to do is we need to teach our children to do right. And if we fail to do that, then our children grow up to be losers. They go to jail, they get on drugs, they do this, they do that, one thing and another. And as society degrades because there's more and more losers, society becomes a society full of losers. I mean, that's just evident. You see it again and again in human history. And so we don't need the Bible. I'm reading from the Bible. I'm talking as if I believe it, and I do. And I told you that I wouldn't argue from the Bible. I'm making points and I'm validating them, validating what the Bible says in them, that we don't need to be taught to do wrong. It is instilled in us from birth. Concerning the created order and how we can know that there is wisdom in it, I'd like to read you something really pretty from the 19th Psalm. It says, "The heavens declare the glory of God. The skies proclaim the work of his hands. Day after day they pour forth speech, and night after night they display knowledge. There is no speech or language where their voice is not heard." Everywhere we see the glory of God displayed in the created order, and we know that he is wise and that he is ever present and that there is a problem between us and him. That's instinctive. You can deny it if you want, but deep down inside you know that this is true. Christianity from, we'll say, I don't know, maybe the 16th century to about the early 20th century was the forerunner in science. And the reason why is because, as Johannes Kepler said, who was one of the, he initiated a couple disciplines of the scientific, how science works. He said, we're thinking God's thoughts after him. That's what scientists are doing. And so this was the standard thought of Christian scientists for many years, is that these disciplines that began by Christians who were just simply trying to understand what God had done and how he had done it. And that set the stage for most of modern science. I mean, like I say, most of the disciplines in modern science were actually started by Christians because they wanted to know about this God and to understand the complexities of what he has done. Now we're going to talk a little more about God's attributes and about God's moral traits, his, what he is like in the days to come. But for right now, before I sign off, I'd like you to think about those attributes. Is that when we deduce something about God, about his nature, about what his attributes are like, whether they're justice or righteousness or love or whatever, you need to understand that these are eternal in nature. And when I say eternal, I don't mean like the earth was created and it's going to go on forever. That's not what I'm saying. When I say something is eternal about God, it means that it simply is. There's no change in it. It didn't begin at one point and go on from there. It just simply is. He always has been. He's outside of time. Therefore, everything about him is. Now, that's very important to remember, because as we start talking about his attributes in the days to come, you're going to realize a tension that exists between his attributes and how we relate to them, something that is actually overwhelming in the human person. And there's really no way ever to take care of this tension on our own. And we're going to have to see what God did to relieve this tension. But keep that in mind for now, is that when we speak about God, we're speaking about his attributes in a form that simply are. There's no change or development in them. The book of Exodus, Exodus 3:14, actually confirms that. When God spoke to Moses at the burning bush, he said, and God said to Moses, I am who I am. And he said, thus you shall say to the children of Israel, I am has sent me to you. So keep that in mind. Think about that, and then we'll talk about them more in depth in the lectures to come. But for now, have a really nice evening.